Are you ready, Nancy? We're calling to order the meeting of September 19th, 2023. And I think we can start with a roll call.
All right. Ms. Austin?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
Here.
Ms. Hupka?
Here.
Mr. Martinez?
Present.
Ms. Swearinger?
Here.
Ms. Prang?
Present.
Ms. Keys?
Here.
And Vice Chair Fuller?
Here.
And Mr. Haggerty is absent, or Chair Haggerty. Okay.
Next, we'll move to the approval of minutes.
I just need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I can second.
I'm sorry, Tina, was that you? Who did the second, Tina? Or Hope? Hope, thank you. I'm so sorry. Okay. Are we ready to vote, or is there any discussion?
Yes. Oh, well, is there any discussion? Okay.
Okay. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Adams?
Yes.
Ms. Hupka?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Abstain.
Abstain, okay. Ms. Swearinger?
Yes.
Ms. Prang?
Yes.
Ms. Keys?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Fuller?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Next on our agenda, we have the public forum. Can I get a motion to open the public forum?
We don't have any public.
Okay, perfect.
Just check online real quick. No, there's. Sorry, I can't see.
There's only me here.
Okay, no, sometimes in the attendees, I couldn't see if it says 0. So we don't have any public, so we
Awesome.
can move on.
So the next item on our agenda is update on first reading of Code Next.
Sorry, as usual, my computer just asked me to log back into Windows right as you were getting to me. So I know I don't necessarily have to explain this for Carl, because Carl's been at each one of the last 3 meetings, probably longer than I have been. So first reading for Code Next was approved originally on September 11th. The city council had a number of amendments, and I'll go through those for you if you like. The first amendment was to remove the owner occupancy requirements that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended for when you recommended the draft. You added back in the 10-year sunset. Ultimately, city council and their approval removed that sunset and all owner occupancy requirements with it. They revised the definition of household to read: a household includes one or more persons related by blood, marriage, adoption, civil union, or committed partnership, or legal guardianship, including foster children living together in a dwelling unit, or up to 4 adults of any relationship and their minor children or legal dependents living in a dwelling unit. Revision number 3, or amendment number 3, was to reverse references from the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals for administrative adjustments. If you'll recall, in that section of the code 16 to 11, it gives authority to the planning department staff, more specifically our community development director, to make minor adjustments for certain things in the code. The appeal route with that, as we discussed in our steering committee meetings, would have gone to Planning and Zoning Commission. I think during our discussions, that felt like the most appropriate group, because these are design related items and not necessarily hardship based items like you normally see go to BOA. The council felt it was more appropriate for it to go to BOA. So the references to P&Z were removed and Board of Adjustment and Appeals was inserted. That item in particular had an unintended consequence, which required us to come back to City Council last night, and I'll go through that one and one other one after I go through the original amendments. So that one required us to also make an amendment to table 2-1, which just removed an A from the P and Z column to the Board of Adjustment column. Then accessory dwelling units, there was an amendment made to that section. Unfortunately, it had an inadvertently incorrect citation. But to change the language to 800 square feet if in a detached building or attached to the principal building. And then item B would be to equal the building footprint if internal to the principal building. So when Councilman Anderson made this motion or this amendment, the intention was to make it for the subsection 2, which talked about the size of ADUs. Unfortunately, he referenced subsection 3, which references detached and attached ADUs on R2 and MUR lots where you can have more than one. So that created an additional conflict that we caught as we were reviewing the draft the next day. So Tuesday, the 12th. We caught these two items, this one and the previous item, which again is what required us to go back to the city council last night. So the city council corrected those amendments last night. So they've all been corrected and moved back in the correct places. The appeal route after Board of Adjustment goes to district court, not to our city council. So that's been corrected to meet up with our charter as well. And then they approved all 3 staff related amendments. So these were amendments that we found as we were doing some final tweaks and final check, mainly final checks, not tweaks, of some items. One, there it was a discrepancy in our short-term rental regulations that had existed all the way back to when they were first adopted. When you go back to that first round of adoption to city council, the council communication talks about every district where this would be allowed, and it lists them all out. Then the table of allowed uses also put, an A for allowed in certain districts. Well, there's additional language in the code where one of those districts was missing, just unintentionally missing, and everything that they had talked about, it should have been in there. Nobody caught then that it wasn't included in that language. So we put it back in that spot and cleared up that issue. The second one is a reference that we don't have in our current code. We have it in the land use table where we reference recreational and medical marijuana uses, but then we don't mention recreational marijuana again in our code. And this one is thankful of Deputy City Attorney sitting next to me. We now, our code will point to the other portions of our code that actually talk about where recreational marijuana uses are allowed and how they're allowed, so that people don't feel lost when they look in land use code and it doesn't even talk about it. There are some allowances through some other portions of our code. We just go back now and reference those sections and say, if you're talking about this, go here, this, go here, this, go here. So that was the second amendment. And the third amendment was something that Chris Brewster caught at the very end, was that there were 2 land uses that weren't included in the section on land use descriptions, one for consignment store large and one for consignment store small. So we requested that council add those 2 back in, and that was there was, I can't say that was it. There was very lengthy discussion at the public hearing. If you haven't watched it, it lasted a few hours. Even city council's first reading, I think, lasted somewhere between 3 and 4 hours. And even last night was still a good discussion. They were still trying to make additional amendments last night. So it was a lot of great discussion on our council. They did, I think, numerous times thank all the work that you all did. I want to thank all the work that you all put in as well. And I'm open for questions if you got them.
I have my hand up.
Sorry, Michelle.
That's okay. I was not able to, Brian, I was not able to watch the meeting. Can you explain the change to remove the staff adjustments to the Board of Equalization rather than to P and Z?
So there was a question by Councilman Ward on whether that went against the charter based on, I'm going to try to remember exactly his discussion. The fact that any kind of variance to our code, to this code, goes to the Board of Adjustment. So I think in his thought process, these would be considered like a variance. So they should go to Board of Adjustment. And so that was kind of where the discussion started. And ultimately, the city attorney, Tamara Niles, felt like she agreed with the sentiment, not necessarily that what we proposed was against charter, but that this might just be the best route.
Okay, and can you refresh my memory on what are those type of adjustments that now are going to go to the BOE instead of P and Z?
Let me pull some up. The majority of them were intended to be used to allow us to do things really associated with the sustainability provisions. But I'll see if I can get some really specific items for you.
Yeah, and if you could clarify, I mean, I hear the word sustainably, but I don't recall what the words are underneath that title.
So some of them are some adjustments to setbacks, lot widths or area. Then there's dimensional development standards, except for height. We couldn't exceed height. And then there's ones that are more specific to design standards, and expansion of nonconformity. So if you'll recall, that was the conversation the gentleman had with us about his duplex that existed in an R1 area that he's never been able to expand or do anything with other than keep it the way it is. This would allow some of those expansions to go through staff instead of having to go through a rezoning process or extensive variance processes. And then for
Okay.
design did you have other questions?
No, keep going. You're good.
Okay.
Oh, I do have other questions. And then,
Yeah.
so the change in the definition of the household, it basically, there's no limit to the number of people who could be in any ADU. Is that correct?
There's not if you think about all of and I think where you're getting at with the inclusion of the children and dependents, that there's not a numerical cap that says like 10 or X.
Okay, so if there's no actual, numerical limit, what else? I mean, there's got to be something in our code that there can't be more than X number of people per square foot.
Right,
parts
those things would start to defer back to the property maintenance code. I think that's one of the documents we brought you all during the public hearing at P&Z to reference. Was there is language in property maintenance code that determines how many people can be in one room, how
And
many
do you
people can be
recall
in a house.
Yeah, and do you recall what those limits are?
I don't. I can email it out to the group tomorrow, but I don't have them right off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
that'd
Or
be
I can-
great. Because sometimes on the website, it's really hard to figure out where certain things are, like the building code versus, I mean, I can find the Muni code. That's easy. There's a full button for
Yeah.
that, but I don't know about the building code so much, if it's all
Right.
that easy to look at. So,
I can email you the sheets from the attachments that we provided during the public hearings at P&Z.
okay, great. And then just so I heard you correctly, so on the ADUs, did you say that they put, because my computer glitched in and out a little bit, so I didn't hear all the words properly. So the ADUs, they can be no more than 800 square feet that you said, or the building footprint?
So it is. Get back to that section.
And I'm sorry, I'm not there. I have a fractured back, and it's just really uncomfortable to sit in anybody else's chairs but my own with all pillows all around. So,
No problem. So I'll go through subsection 2. Accessory dwelling units may be located in a detached accessory building attached to an existing building or located within the principal building, such as an attic or basement. Total floor area of the accessory dwelling unit shall be limited to no more than A, 800 square feet if in a detached building or attached to the principal building. B, equal to the building footprint if internal to the principal building.
okay, that's what I wrote down. Okay, great. Well, okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
You might have answered this. The limit of 4 adults and unlimited children, that's for a detached ADU and a attached internal ADU and the resident itself.
It would go for any of the occupancy of a single family dwelling unit. Once you get into multifamily dwelling units, you're getting multiple families. But anything that's basically single family attached, detached, whether it's an ADU, a duplex, a triplex, single family home, that's the limit.
Could you just quickly clarify your first comment that you made around the revision with owner occupancy requirements?
Right, so if you'll recall during the public hearing at Planning and Zoning Commission, the draft that we presented, you had no owner occupancy requirements. The Planning and Zoning Commission requested, or during y'all's recommendation process and amendment process, you recommended approval of the code with the amendment to include owner occupancy requirements, but to include them with a 10-year sunset provision. The city council during their amendment process chose to remove that altogether. So not just to say that there's owner occupancy requirements with no provision, there's just no owner occupancy requirements included for ADUs. And I also should say that these were very contentious votes. Some that were 4-3, some were 6-1. They voted on each amendment alone, and then they voted on the code as a whole with all the amendments included. So it was a very, very, very long, very detailed discussion on their part.
Anyone else have questions?
I don't have questions. I have a few comments, though. I want to thank council for their update on the definition of household to be inclusive of children. I think it's helpful to our city as a whole, helpful to our school district, and to families in need who have multi-generational housing situations or are immigrants or refugees. So much appreciation there. And I do want to continue to express my desire to have further study on the occupancy requirement and council's decision to remove that. I agree with the P&Z recommendation that we sent forth to council. And I just think that there's a lot more study that could be had, and perhaps the task force could take that on a little more deeply. That's all I have for now.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you again for all of y'all's hard work over the last 3 to 4 years of this process. We're not done yet. Second reading is scheduled, I believe, right now for Monday night, not to begin before 9:37. Okay. Right. So it's a very interesting thing. We have to post for 7 days. That 7 days goes on a 24-hour kind of a loop. So it's based on when it was approved and then when it was posted for notice.
The next item on our agenda is staff's choice.
So another one, and this one might be sprung on Nancy a little bit, but I didn't know if the commission would like to have a discussion on going back to including the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of our meetings, or if y'all are okay that it's not included. I just wanted to ask that question since it has been a pretty big discussion topic. I think at even one of our meetings, the citizens led the pledge because it's not part of our agenda. So I just want to make sure and ask that question and get some feedback on that from you all.
I'm not opposed to it if that is what the recommendation is. Should we vote on that? Or just voice our opinions?
I'm curious to know what the precedent it is in other commissions, what's typically
We can
So-
certainly look at that. What other boards and commissions are doing in our, it was just something we want to ask your opinion on because it seems to have been a pretty hot topic that day. So definitely want to ask without, people thinking that we're not listening to them.
I'm just curious, since I haven't been here as long, when it happened that the Pledge of Allegiance was no longer said at the beginning of the meetings and why that was the case.
I don't know. We'll go back through some old agendas and see if we can find out if it's never been for this. I don't know. But I've also only been here for a year and a half. So my purview, my knowledge on this issue is very limited. So we can ask the historians of our department like Brooke and John and Nancy.
I have a quick comment on that.
Okay.
Was that Michelle?
I should, yeah, sorry. I was waiting for somebody to call on me. I don't have any, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think that it shows our citizens, respect for our country and that we are, and it also shows our citizens and reminds ourselves that we are in a judicial body, quasi-judicial body. And I don't see why there would be a whole bunch of objections to it because I just think it's good statesmanship, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I have a comment as well. I don't have any issue saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and I think if constituents are calling for that, that we honor that. I also just want to make note that us showing up and volunteering our time on this commission sends a strong message and demonstrates the values that would be present in citing the Pledge of Allegiance. So one way or the other, and I do agree, we should get some information on the precedents of when that started and ended, if it ever occurred on the commission level.
I'll weigh in. Of course, I'm patriotic and I agree. We're doing our citizen duty, just doing this. And this is a very democratic process for which I'm very proud to be a part of this country. I don't think that one person should bully the group into standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. And in fact, that person was very uncivil in demanding that we do something without taking a vote. And that was in fact undemocratic. I will look at it and see, Carl's been here, now you're our veteran. If you ever recall having had to say, we've never done that. So, we are quasi-judicial, but we're not the city council. Whatever you want to decide and vote on later, after maybe we've looked into some precedent, I would reconsider it then.
I started at the beginning of 2019 and I don't recall it was a part of that, but I know Michelle predates that for her service. So I don't know if Michelle, if you remember like in 2018 or before, if that was established.
I don't recall that we did it when I started. I don't recall. And I don't think it's bullying by anybody. I think it's a matter of, like I said, statesmanship and that sort of thing. I think that the person who asked for it to be done in some respects appeared to be somewhat of a bull in a china shop kind of thing. We were kind of, I think, caught unawares and it went forward. But I don't think it was a big deal that happened. And I don't think that should have any impact on what we do. I do think it's more of us looking more, like I said, statesmanship, and it certainly can't hurt. And I guess that's my opinion.
Any other comments or questions from the group?
So what I have to look into is what do other departments and boards and commissions do in our city as far as Pledge of Allegiance, and then look back in our history and find out if the Planning and Zoning Commission ever had the pledge as part of the agenda. And if so, when did it stop? And if I can find out why, find out why. Okay, we'll bring that back next time.
Thank you, Brian. And anything else from staff?
I have nothing else.
Next is attorney's choice.
I have nothing else at this time either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then the next would be commissioner's choice. Do any commissioners have anything that they want to ask or comment on?
So I just wanted to address some comments that were made last evening at City Council. So during public comment, there was some direct addressing of Councilmember Anderson, who is a pastor. And there was a member of the public who came forward and was citing Bible scripture as justification for what their sentiment was. And I just want to express strongly my personal feelings that that doesn't have a place in our discussion, that church and government are completely separate. And that's a personal choice. And if we're going to include Bible verses in our discourse, then it should be inclusive of the Quran and any other text that people may or may not worship. So just wanted to make that clear that I think that church and state are separate.
Thank you, Tina.
I think that also, I can back that up, but the city rents out the hall over here on Sunday mornings to a church group that outgrew their current where they were having their services. We are making some money on that, and they have been very secret on how much money we actually make on them having their service here. But separation of church and state is very important. I mean, you start combining them and you're asking for just chaos. So Joe Anderson took a lot of flack last night, and some of it was because of his religion, that he was letting people know that he was a pastor as he was trying to get signs put in their yard. And that's a problem there, but I don't know how many people he told that to, but there was some. So as far as the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm fine with that. If it's a common thing in planning and zoning groups within different cities, that's fine. It somewhat solidifies the group as a official meeting, possibly. If we don't do it, that's fine with me. If we do it, that's fine also. But I was there at the council meeting last night, and the lady interrupted and tried to get she did get a bunch of people to go ahead and do the pledge. And I just sat there and I thought, what the hell's going on here? This can't, people can't just jump up and take over the meeting. It was crazy. So, but she apologized later that she didn't know that they did one at the beginning of the meeting. And then they went into an executive session and then came out, and she thought they needed to do another one. So she was erring on what she thought was going on, and she apologized. But you still don't take over a meeting just from the audience and make people do what you want them to do.
Michelle?
Yeah, and Carl, thank you so much for bringing that up, because I was not referring to, I didn't see anything about the city council meeting yesterday, so I had no idea that happened then. So my comments previously were based on the last I think the last in-person P and Z meeting, or at least one of our P and Z meetings, one of the people in public forum did say, I think that since it's a quasi judicial committee, that we need to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and we did. So I was referring to that. If there was a extensive sort of takeover like you're describing, I'm not in support of that, and perhaps that was boring. I was referring only to the planning and zoning meeting. Just want to make sure it's clear.
I guess I'll just add a comment just because maybe we don't have anything else on the agenda, but unfortunately, saying for the Pledge of Allegiance or hanging an American flag outside your house has become such a divisive and dividing issue that people use more to tell which cable news network they watch rather than their patriotism. I'm all for the Pledge of Allegiance. I could go either way on it. I would like to stick with decorum of what's typical for these bodies. I'm also interested to know if Inglewood, the city, or any other organizations associated with the city have done a land acknowledgement of the original stewards of this land. I think that's probably more apropos for the work that we do around zoning and use of land. But again, that would be probably throwing some matches on the fire, or some gas on the fire. So yeah, that's all I'll add.
Any final comments? Okay, and with that, our meeting is adjourned for September 19th, 2023.
Thanks, Michelle.